Welcome to this episode of Game and Earn. In today's video, we are going to go over some of the biggest gainers in terms of value over the last 31 days. Today, we'll specifically be going over Nintendo consoles. We'll take a look at both loose and complete in box games to see where you can make some profits. With that out of the way, let's get to it and find some ways to game and earn. Starting off this month's video, we're going to jump right into it with Bucky O'Hare Loose for the NES. One of the poster childs for games released late in a console's life cycle, this title has long been sought after by collectors. The game was based off of the 1980s comic book series of the same name, and probably got kickstarted from the increasing popularity of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. In the winter months of last year, the price for a loose copy was dropping slowly but surely, from the pretty steady average of $180 dropping all the way to below $150 mark. But now the prices seem to be readjusting, and we're seeing a spike back up. With roughly a handful of sales a month, it won't be a fast mover, but also it is in demand enough to where you can entertain reasonable offers. But what's the ultimate upside here? While I do enjoy this title and it's a very common name people know for expensive NES games, will it continue to hold the value? Personally, I think it will. All this game has done is go up and up and up in value over the last 5 years, with each dip followed by a corresponding increase shortly after. For that reason, I'm a buyer, and I would hold on to this copy until it clears the $200 price point at a minimum. Moving on to the SNES, this is a title that needs no introduction, so let's cover Chrono Trigger Complete in Box for the Super Nintendo. Consistently placing inside any top 5 RPG games of all time list, this title was an extremely ambitious and in-depth game from Square. There's amazing combat, an unreal soundtrack, beautiful story, and memorable characters. What more is there to ask for? But in recent months, we've seen a pretty stark drop in price for a CIB copy, dropping from the peaks of $1,000 all the way down to sub 600. Normally you can chalk this up to mostly poor condition copies, but that wasn't exactly the case here. We saw some pretty good condition copies sell for that price range, so I think the market just overcorrected itself after the most recent price surge. Based off of game quality and rarity, I think this should easily be a $1,000+ title for CIB, so you obviously can tell where my mind is heading. Just trying to acquire one of the 2 posters that were included is going to run you at least $100, so finding a complete in-box copy for under $700 is a steal in my opinion. We'll mark this as a buy, and if you know anyone selling a copy for around the $650 or less price point, you should be reaching out right now. Don't be afraid to pull that trigger. Next up is another RPG classic in Final Fantasy II for the Super Nintendo, complete in box. For the uninitiated, this was actually the 4th entry in the Final Fantasy series, but since it was only the second mainline game released here in America, it was marked as 2. Regardless, this was the first entry on the SNES, and while not remembered as fondly as some of the other entries around this era, I rather enjoyed it. And I think the gaming community as a whole did as well, as this previously used to be a much cheaper title than Final Fantasy III, but it's pretty similar in value right now. The most recent price drop doesn't need that much scrutiny though, as it looks like just a blip on the radar. In fact, there was even a sale for under $100 for a CIB copy, but if you look at the sale, oh no.
Alan, this species of variformin's been extinct since the Cretaceous period. I mean, this thing isn't this thing. What?
Regardless, this game seems to have recovered quite nicely, now sitting back right under the $300 price point. And while I think this title is good, I don't really think it's deserving of being this close to Final Fantasy III in terms of value. In a few years, it could still match the value, but I would bet against it without some sort of rejuvenation for interest. For those reasons, I'm going to label this as a sell, but be sure you're getting close to $300 for it. Don't sell it for a couple of dollars. Moving on to a Nintendo 64 title that I firmly believe gets far too much praise, let's cover Conker's Bad Fur Day CIB for the Nintendo 64. I won't bore you with the tropes about how raunchy and funny this game is, so instead I'll simply tell you that this was yet again another title released late on the system's life cycle. Released in early 2001, this game did not sell well, and really only became popular years after release. If I asked you which titles sold more copies in the last year between Conkers and Mario Kart 64, one of the most iconic games on the system, you'd probably just assume it was Mario Kart, right? Well, you'd be absolutely correct.
Nice.
But it's basically neck and neck with Mario Kart, selling just 5 more copies a year. That just shows how popular this title actually is. The weight that Conkers carries is pretty immense for a series that hasn't had a game since 2005. But we're here to talk about the price and the trend. So, we saw a rather steady price of over $300 during the summer, but a slow decline from September to December, dropping all the way down to roughly $240. Now, people have awoken from their Christmas slumber and are back to buying this title, and we're likely going to see it increase again to over $300. So until it breaks a new high, I'm going to mark this as a hold. We should see a steady increase again, but this has and will always be a niche title to me, and in 10 years' time, it probably won't hold the same value as a Mario Kart or a Zelda. Continuing marching forward, let's cover the Wii entry for the series, Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. Another fun, yet overlooked entry in the Fire Emblem series, Radiant Dawn has slowly become more and more valuable. While not as valuable as the GameCube title, this title has increased pretty reliably over the last couple of years. I gotta tell you though, sometimes I feel like I'm a broken record on this channel, but it's gonna bear repeating one more time.
Deja vu.
We're very likely seeing an increase in price in this title simply due to the release of another entry in the series, Fire Emblem Engage. Usually the weeks leading up to a release, you'll see prices increase, as I've said before. But the important second part of that is that the prices usually come back down after the new game has actually released. This video is coming out a week or two after the release, so we're probably going to see those prices come back down to roughly $100. Due to that, I'm obviously going to mark this as a sell, as I love the series, but this seems to have been artificially raised and likely will be much more affordable in a month or two. We're going to finish off this video with a lesser known title for the GBA. Obviously, I'm referring to Pokemon Emerald. My personal favorite of the mainline Pokemon games, this was the combo title for the third generation of the series. Probably the title with the most reproductions in existence. You need to keep a keen eye out when purchasing or selling this, as sometimes you might get a little too excited to do your due diligence when making a purchase. That being said though, Pokemon Emerald has been on a steady increase over the last several years.
I'm all the way up. Nothing can stop me. I'm all the way.
Only recently being affected by any kind of dip at all, but it has surged back up in value, eclipsing the $150 price point for the first time in a couple of years. This is also one of the best-seller GBA games out there, with over 1,000 sales a year. Where do we think this price is going, though? It's already near an all-time high and likely will experience a dip again in the future. Due to that, we're going to mark this as a sell. While I love this title and I think it's amazing, there are millions of copies in circulation, so the demand will be similar, but the supply also doesn't seem to be dropping anytime soon. For that, I'm a sell on this, as getting $150 for such a common title, relatively speaking, is an easy choice for me. Alright, well, that's going to wrap up this month's video for Game & Earn in the month of February for Nintendo systems, all the way from NES to Switch. If you enjoyed the content, please make sure to like and subscribe, and feel free to drop any comments with questions or suggestions. We plan on doing monthly videos for all major systems and more. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.